Hello and welcome to your Kinship Care program protocol. My name is Margaret Telsh Williams. I'll be your trainer today. This will be pretty short and sweet. Kinship Care is a new program for 211 Virginia, and it's utilized to help prevent children from entering the foster care system. It's definitely a program geared towards helping children reduce trauma from negative experiences and potentially stay in a safe home that is familiar to them with individuals who are also familiar to them. So the vision and goal of Kinship Care is presented by the Family First Prevention Services Act. So this is a federally funded program, and it provides local Virginia Department of Social Services with the ability to do this work to try to keep children safe, strengthen families, and reduce the need for foster care. This program is not currently available all across Virginia. It's still in its pilot phase, but with good results, we should expect to see it spread across the Commonwealth. So Family First realizes that children do best when they are with their families and in supportive communities, as opposed to being placed in a home with strangers in a community that may or may not be familiar. So they try to keep families intact as best as possible for as long as possible. Individuals who can't safely stay at home should really be living with ideally relatives or even a close family friend. So this could be a neighbor that has known them for a long time that they're very close with. And ideally it's somebody that they feel safe with and that can help take care of them. But obviously taking on children that you're not used to having in your home can put some strains on this new family and how they can best support themselves. So when all else fails, then foster care would be implemented, but this is all of the prevention measures that they could possibly take. So what is kinship care? It is the full-time care and nurturing of a child by a relative or someone who has significant emotional relationship with the child not born to them. Now, full-time care means that this individual is taking on children that are living in their home. It's not the same as a grandmother whose daughter and granddaughter are living with them, but more so a grandmother who is caring 100% for the granddaughter, and the daughter is not maybe in the picture for whatever reason. So it is full-time care. It's not about having them every other weekend or anything like that, where their actual biological parent or adopted parent is still involved in nurturing them and caring for them. So these can be blood relatives, they can be related by marriage, or they can be what they call fictive kin. This is those neighbors that they're close with, or someone that they met at a worship service that they've always had close bonds to. So it can be a wide variety. The point is that the person is familiar to the child and they feel safe with them. So they break up the kinship care relationships into 4 different possible levels. The first is what's considered informal. This is just a basic word-of-mouth arrangement made between the parent with the other individual, and there's no child welfare involved. It's just the parent recognizing that they are struggling and asking someone else to help bear this burden for them temporarily or long term. This is still considered part of kinship care, even though there is no legally binding information and nothing about the system is connected to them. It still qualifies as kinship care. And that's key to remember when we talk to individuals, that if they're watching someone else's child full time, that is kinship care. Now, our formal levels of kinship care, the first one is that child welfare is involved and temporary kinship caregiving is necessary for safety reasons. This could be related to abuse, drugs, any type of thing that is making it seem as though the child would not necessarily be safe to remain in that place. But it is not a transfer of custody. It is simply child welfare placing this individual with an aunt or placing this child with a grandparent or a neighbor. But child welfare is involved. The next level, which is formal level 2, means that child welfare is involved and they're actually transferring the custody to this other caregiver. So the parent no longer has custody. Now this child is under the household of the aunt, of the uncle, of the grandfather. So there is still involvement, and now custody has moved. In formal level 3, the child welfare involvement has reached that upper level. This is where Department of Social Services actually retains custody of the child, and it's at this level that an individual is placed in foster care. So the child is going to reside with the caregiver, and the caregiver who is related to them or a close neighbor is actually considered a licensed foster family. So there's still someone that they know, but it is technically foster care where the custody remains with DSS. So this is information that's good for background. This is not information you need to explain to callers at any point. So who is eligible for kinship care? This is any caregiver that is taking care of someone else's child, basically. Now keep in mind it's only in certain areas of the Commonwealth right now, but it is any caregiver is eligible for support. So the challenges that these caregivers face is not unlike challenges that parents face on a regular basis, only they are taking on this responsibility which may be completely new to them, and they don't have a foundation in their mind of how they're going to make this work just yet. So it's going to impact them in a way they're not used to or the way that they're not familiar with. This complicates matters when you have perhaps an aging grandparent who also has health issues or limited income, and they're trying to care for their grandchild. Other individuals may have significant emotional stress when it comes to bringing in this family and taking them on, because it does put a strain on the new caregiver as well. And depending on the situation, because this is a kin scenario potentially, there could be a lot of really emotionally heightened elements going on with the reason behind why the children are being removed and coming to live with them. So there could be feelings, all across the board for what has occurred that has prompted this scenario to take place. But these challenges often are making it difficult for caregivers to take on the responsibility of these children, and that is where the kinship care wants to come in to help. So what they notice and what we've observed is that in addition to the stress, perhaps strained income, is having access to benefits, having access to housing, financial difficulties now with more mouths to feed, strained relationships with the child's parents are possible, this lack of accessible training. Maybe they are not parents in the past at all, and they're not familiar with how to have a child in their home, but they're willing to do it. As well as school enrollment. Potentially this child has to move to a different school district, or if the child is still very young, looking at child care issues that they're not familiar with. So there's a whole system out there that these caregivers have never experienced potentially, that is now their sole responsibility. So the regional kinship navigators, doesn't matter which of the 4 types of care this is considered, they're here to provide resources and support to the caregivers. And this is done through Department of Social Services. And what they do is similar to us with just basic information referral, what agencies are out there that can help them. But what's different is that the kinship navigators actually do targeted case management. They have training on trauma-informed care. They can provide access to these caregivers for support groups, as well as get them access to benefits such as food stamps. So right now, these kinship navigators, this role, are individuals in these communities. So if you are helping someone and you realize that they really are doing kinship care, you can obviously provide them with every resource you have available for their needs. But if they live in these certain areas that you see here, you could also refer them to the kinship navigator at their Department of Social Services. So you don't have to memorize these names of these cities. because the database system will give you an option for a Kinship Navigator if they are in these cities and you search for it. So we'll get to that here in just a moment. The role of 211, as we said, is to provide this support and get kinship caregivers into contact with the right services to help support them. This is a formal agreement that we have with DSS to be that go-between. It's very similar to our connection with infant and toddler connection, where we are providing a service as this gateway from one to the next. So there are two ways that a caregiver can contact us. This could be through a DSS media campaign. If they saw advertising and there's a specific 800 number for them to call, that 800 number will actually ring to 211 Virginia for us to answer. And we should be able to identify that on In Contact when it is a Kinship Navigator, Kinship Care call. It may also be something that we identify ourselves through the course of conversation. So as we're talking with our caller, no matter what line they came into us through, perhaps we will recognize that they're caring for someone else's children and they may need additional supports. When it comes to our information and referral process that we're also familiar with, we want to give the exact same referrals that we would as normal for their need to the best of our ability. Remember, we're always looking for what is an appropriate and adequate referral. So we want to search for what's needed for them. But if we know or we have recognized that this is someone who might benefit from a kinship navigation, we can certainly check to see if their community is one of those localities. But absolutely feel free, beyond giving them a referral to their kinship navigator for their area, feel free to give them anything that you need to about benefits assistance, child care resources, anything for housing, rent, mortgage, medical needs, information for the schools, and then obviously mental health resources as counseling may be necessary for themselves or the children that they're now caring for. Similar to infant and toddler connection, when they dial this 800 number, they may not realize how they ended up with 211 Virginia, so you can just let them know that we're answering the calls for them. And then this important note, something we've already touched on, obviously, but do make sure that you remember that this is not available everywhere in Virginia just yet. We do our part to fill in the gaps, so kind of think of this referral to kinship navigation as an extra piece that you're able to offer when they live in a certain area instead of a necessary referral. Now, if you select in your record as you're working through with the database, the type of call obviously is going to be kinship care. Let's see if I have that available for you. The type of call is going to be kinship care. Unlike infant and toddler, where we are trying to work through as the child as our person in need, in these cases it's going to be the caregiver that is the person in need. So we would capture their information here, not the child's. But here's kinship navigation is what you can select for your type of call. We do generally still want to ask them how they heard about us, of course, so that we know how the information is being spread, whether or not it was through a campaign that DSS ran, or if it was just, maybe a friend told them to call 211 because it was a utility bill issue and they didn't even realize they could qualify for this. But no matter how we get this caller, as soon as we recognize that it's a kinship opportunity, please change the call type to kinship navigation, even if you thought initially it was just a regular referral call. So our person in need is our caregiver. And when we put in, let's say, a zip code for 24016 for the council, when we put that in, our keyword is kinship care. And we'll select that. And it comes right up if you just start the letter. This is under the need, individual, family, and community support. Now, if we search for this listing, it's only going to give us results if they have a kinship navigator in the area. And Roanoke does not. So let's come up to somewhere that it does have it. Let's try Arlington here. So if I change the call region to Arlington. And then we search again. We should get a pop for Kinship Navigator. So if you're searching for Kinship Care and not getting any results, this would be why, because it's not available in that region. And keep that in mind. Sometimes we forget that it's not just going to show up for us all the time. It doesn't mean anything's wrong with the system. It actually means that it's not available for that area that you're searching. So do remember that. And when you do your notes, similar to a crisis call where we would start it with crisis, we want to start these with Kinship Care. And then we would next place the need. So perhaps it was utilities, or they need a new car, something along those lines. And then put relationship to the child. We'll say, is the grandmother of the child 7 years old. So your note may look something similar to this, and that's really all you need to add. As new needs are presented, sometimes these calls can take a little longer once you identify the situation, because you may be asking, oh, do you receive food stamps? Do you receive WIC for young children? Anything like that that may come up for them. Have you had any trouble paying your rent? So we want to be very thorough with these individuals. They are deserving of extra support, and we want to provide it where we can. But if you have any questions, feel free to let us know. Thanks.